So the food is in honor of my granddaughter Esther Brody's bas mitzvah, which was last night. The bas mitzvah asked, there was things that weren't even open that should go to Limud HaTorah. So please enjoy. Just want to give some background, understanding in Hilchos Niddah and keep on working with the subject that we are working with, which is minhag Yisrael. And to be clear, and to sum up weeks and weeks of learning in a sentence, I don't think that there's a big difference in our hanhaga as Jews, of whether we're doing something mishum minhag or whether we're doing something mishum halacha. I'm very aware, like you are, of the different halachic classifications: deraisa, derabanan, minhag, chumra, halacha l'maishem misinai. I know, but what I'm saying is that just because something is a minhag, it's only a minhag, doesn't make it less of a toikef. The word itself doesn't tell us that it's any more makel. Minhag is how we practice, and halacha is how we go. That's all. Like, what's the difference between what's the halacha? What's the halacha? So halacha is they have to keep minhagim. That's the halacha, and there's gedarim as to what minhagim. We've been talking about it. We've spent a lot of time in Das Yehudis. That's inyanim of minhag that are brought in halacha, and it is halacha. It's 100% halacha, but it's mishum minhag, meaning that it wasn't necessarily something that that Moshe Rabbeinu received at Har Sinai per se, but it was minhagim that Klal Yisrael took upon themselves for many, many reasons, either to protect the Torah or to. This was the right, but at the end of the day, what we are Jews, and we have to act like Jews. Men and women should act like Jews, and there's minhag Yisrael, and this is why you hear a lot of times that a minhag is even stronger than a din. This is our minhag. This is how we're noiheg. This is what we do. So, if you go to, please open your Chumash to Parshas Mitzorah, Vayikra Tesvav. Pasuk Yud Tes. And here, the Torah introduces, for the first time in the middle of talking about other inyanim of Tumah and Tahara, the Torah introduces the inyan of nida, which we should all be familiar with, the basic how that works. But what we're not so familiar with, interestingly, is the background of it. What's deraisa, what's derabanan, what's minhag? That's what I want to say. Not to make any of it, again, I want to just make this disclaimer, not to make any of it more machmir or makel than the other part necessarily, but just what it is, how the whole thing works. We're supposed to be Talmidei Chacham, let's understand. So the Torah tells us, the Isha, everyone have it? Yud Tes. V'isha kisiya Zava dam, yia Zova bivsara. That if a woman is Zova dam, means there's a flow, Zava dam. There's a flow of dam. Simple case. A woman is a flow of dam. It's part of the creation, part of the world, part of the bria. Isha kisiya Zava dam, yes Zova bivsara. Now every one of these words has a couple of blot in it, Masechta Niddah. So just reading the pasuk. It's ironic that many people are familiar with the blot in Masechta Niddah and never read the pasuk. So the pasuk says, Isha kisiya Zava dam. She has to be Zava. That's like one set of halachas. Dam has to be dam. There are 74 different things which come out of women. People say, what are you looking for? I'm not a Bucky. David HaMelech was a Bucky in all 74, but it's ayin daled, different things from a halachic point of view. Maybe doctors found more. They obviously fall into different categories. But what the halachi here is talking about is Zava dam, which I will explain. Yes, Zova bivsara, and it has to be Zova bivsara. That's another limud, that it's coming as opposed to being taken out with an instrument or taking out in a surgery or something like that. There's so many limudim from the fact, which we will get to at some point, of Zova bivsara. That's the way, a natural flow through the flesh. So what happens? That, by the way, Kimlu l'chazal, Chazal taught us, which should be the positive shot. We just learned Hilchos Niddah. That's what happens with this. Shivas yamim tia benidasa v'chol hanagea ba yitma, talking about when there was Tumah and Tara, Kachim, chol hanagea ba yitma ad ha'arev, and kol asher tishkav alav benidasa yitma, can't cohabit with this person, he become tamei, and then the Torah goes on to tell us that husband and wife that could be chayiv kares for this. And what's the halacha? The halacha is the Torah says that shivas yamim tia benidasa. Now let me explain what this means. Remember, we're not learning now halacha l'maisa, we're learning a pasuk in Chumash. The pasuk in Chumash says that if a woman becomes a nida, so she is a nida for 7 days, period. It doesn't make any difference if she's a nida for 1 minute. It doesn't make any difference if she stops this flow at the end of 7 days. It doesn't make any difference. The point of it is that a nida is 7 days. Why? Midaraisa. A nida is 7 days, and at the 7 days, she goes to the mikvah, she's tahar, period. That's the whole story. There's no 5 days, there's no 7 days, there's no hefsek tahara, there's no zayin nikiyim, which is of course the biggest difference. There's no zayin nikiyim. Zayin nikiyim is to make sure you went 7 days without dam. No. You can, on the way to the mikveh, you could have dam. That's as long as that the 7 days have gone by and she's no longer bleeding. What's up with this? So I'll explain the I'm intimidated by the doctors, but forgive me. I'm doing the best I can as a yeshiva bacher. If you look further, there's another halacha in pasuk chaf hey. So another halacha finished with Hilchos Niddah. That was Hilchos Niddah. Did you get the whole thing? Very very simple, clear. Hilchos Niddah midaraisa. Woman becomes a nida, 7 days. She's tamei. Goes to the mikveh, she's tar. Period. That was a pun. Pasuk chafei, v'isha ki yazuv zoiv dama. Another thing, yamim rabim. Let's say a woman has a flow, keeps on going on, but it's below es nidasa. Underline these words in your mind. It's below es nidasa, es nidasa. It's not the time of the month. It's not the time of the month. Or another scenario, in other words, like it's not supposed to be a nida here, so why is she having Zava dama? And here, by the way, it doesn't say bivsara. A lot of the diukim that we had, that I just made before, doesn't say here, but it's below es nidasa. Or another case, kisazuv al nidasa. She keeps on having her flow or bleeding even after the time of nida is over. Not 7 days, but 8 days, 9 days, 10 days, keeps on going. So zoiv tumasa kimei nidasa tia tmeyahi. This is called, and I'm going to make it easier for you. You can look in the psukim. This is called the Zava gedola. A Zava, different thing, not a nida, a Zava. A Zava is somebody who has the same type of a showing, a presentation of dam, but it's not dam nida. How do we know it's not dam nida? Because it's below es nidasa, because it's not at the time that she's supposed to be a nida. So what is it? Zava. Zava is an illness, or it's a condition. So it's not necessarily a woman can go her whole life without being a Zava, or she can become a Zava regularly. It's a condition, as opposed to nida, which is a healthy thing, right? When Sari Menu became a nida, she made a kiddush. She appears a nida. That means your body's working again like a young person. So nida is a good thing. Zava is a bad thing. I don't mean bad that it's a bad thing, but Zava is not clear to me. I know different definitions or medical conditions that have been attributed to Zava, lavdafka, but whatever it is, let's just call it a Zava. In Zava, the Torah tells us there's two kinds. There's a Zava gedola and a Zava ketana. A Zava gedola is if somebody saw for less than 3 days. In other words, this Zava she saw for less than 3 days. So now what has to happen, again, remember, we're talking about Beloy Eis Nida, which I'm going to explain a little bit in a minute, but she sees for less than 3 days. Let's say she sees for 1 day, a 1 day flow. So then she has to be Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom, the Torah says. Okay, so you have to have 1 day with Dam, 1 day without Dam. And then she goes to the mikveh. So another 2 days. It's a 2-day deal maybe. But if she sees for 3 days, it's like maybe like a chazaka. So then she becomes, I'm sorry, that's a Zava Gedola. That becomes a Zava Gedola. Now it gets complicated. So now we have to make sure that she's 100% clean. How do you do that? You do a hefsek tara, zayin nikiyim, and then go to the mikveh. So, according to everything I just said, when we practice Hilchos Niddah, what are we practicing? Hilchos Niddah? Hilchos Zava Gedola. They should take the title in the Shulchan Aruch and rename it Hilchos Zava Gedola, because every single thing that we do about it has nothing to do with Niddah. It has to do with Zava Gedola. Just want to just explain, just refresh your memory of how the whole thing works in a nutshell, as much as I know. But in other words, what we need to understand in this is that biologically, a period is not 2 days or 3 days or 5 days, it's 30 days. There's a 30-day cycle. Scientifically, it could be a 38-day cycle. It could be a 28-day cycle, but let's call it, for most women that were created by Hashem, most of them, it's a 30-day cycle. That's kind of like an average, and that's kind of like normal. In that 30-day cycle, a number of things happen. It's all healthy. It's all mitzias. But what's basically happening is, I'm a little self-conscious about your sunbathing. Is it all right? I don't want to inhibit my explanation. Okay. It's okay. So in the 30-day cycle, a few things take place, but basically what's happening is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in the Bria the possibility of having a child. That's really what's going on here in the Inyanim of Niddah. And what's the uteral lining, which is called the endometrium, has to be prepared properly to be able to carry a child. Like if a man would have to carry a child, it would not work because we don't have the kelim to carry a child. And a woman also doesn't work except for the nest, the absolute nest that takes place every month, presumably, with a woman that when it's time to have a child, and this is a monthly cycle, a monthly process, when it's time to have a child, so it goes like this, that first of all, the brain produces hormones like progesterone and estrogen, and that everything's in the brain, I was saying to somebody yesterday that years ago when I lived in Muncie, so there's a psychiatrist in my shul, so he suggested that I go jogging every day. Don't even try to imagine. I used to go jogging every day. So I would jog every day. So he came to David. He said, "How's it going?" So I said, "My knees hurt." He says, "Your brain hurts." Okay, my brain hurts. Feels like my knees to me, but the pain signal. The pain signal. He argued, is a psychiatrist, So they say if you're a hammer, everything you see is a nail. So the pain signal comes from the brain. So your knees don't hurt. It's just that your brain is telling your knees, be careful, you're working too hard, just get over with it over here. But I just tell you that the hormones, if I'm not mistaken, are all produced in the pituitary gland and in the brain area. That's how the brain is telling the pituitary gland to produce estrogen and progesterone and other hormones. There's other hormones also, very complicated system, which I'm not a bucky in. But what happens is that these hormones come in at the beginning to strengthen the endometrium, which is the inner lining of the uterus, and that way that can hold the baby. That's what those different hormones are doing. At the same time, the ovaries are busy producing a seed, and if it picks out from thousands and thousands of seeds, it picks out the one which is going to have the 1 or the 10 or whatever it is that have the most chance of survival. they come into the, this is all Niflois Haber. You could become frum just from knowing how this works. It goes into the endometrium uteral area. If it's fertilized by a male seed, so then it can become a child. I think there's probably like a 1 in a million chance of this happening, but here we all are, right? So it's a nest. It's a nest. Now, that's what happens. This is where the cycle begins, and you've got, let's call it 11 days to have a child. They usually, for most people, this process, like the ultimate time in this process, is about 15 days into the cycle, usually. Between 12 and 15 days, which people say, like, wow, like that's perfect with the Leil HaTavila. Do you ever hear that? So that's shus.
It's not always.
First of all, no, it's nothing to do with it, because that's happens to come out. I mean, maybe everything's hashgacha pratis, but that's not the Kabbalah Satorah, because the Kabbalah Satorah is after 7 days she's not a nida b'deraisa. So that would have to be, as I'm going to explain to you in a minute, that would have to be based on chubra al gabi chubra, minhag al gabi minhag. That sperm comes out perfect. Happens to be that it does come out perfect for most women. For most women, most of the fertility shilas that I receive, ani hakatan, have to do with the moment of ovulation being a day earlier or 2 days earlier. So what do we do now? I can't go to the mikveh until 12 days, earliest, right? And I'm missing the ovulation, and there could be infertility for years and years because of that. So we'll get to that, but it's just to get the biology clear, as best as it's not only as best as I could explain. I think I could explain it a little bit better, but as much as we need to understand for our purposes over here. What happens is that if this ovulation did not get fertilized, this egg did not get fertilized and turn into the beginning of a child, that the endometrium has to hold, and hence the pregnancy goes on and the hormones are doing their things. If that doesn't happen, so the body says, Hashem says, okay, so we don't need this endometrium. Why schlep around this endometrium? And another nest takes place that it begins to break down. The layers become very thin. Different hormones come in to basically destroy the endometrium, and the endometrium is released from the woman's body, and she becomes a nida. So the nida status is a very simple case of the breakdown of the endometrium. Theoretically, if we're looking at dam nida, so if you want to know if it's dam nida, you would have to know, is this the breakdown of the endometrium or is it not? Now, this can be told by many, many ways. Very few of them do I know, by the way. I'm looking at Mars every day, but I don't really know what I'm looking at, meaning because we go with the Shulchan Aruch says, look, if it looks like dam and it has one of the 3-4 colors, and we have a Masorah for hundreds of years, so then we know it's us, and if it doesn't know, it's mutter. But if you know for sure it's not a breakdown from the endometrium, so for instance, let's say there's a petza there, it's got nothing to do with this whole cycle. So if it has nothing to do with the whole cycle, even now, like Rav Zalman Auerbach says, even now, a petza deep inside the uterus, like a fibroid, even that's not today with instruments you can know that it doesn't even have to be a petza. Could be deep inside. There could be an ovarian petza. Instruments can find it today. So it's a petza. All we need to know for sure is that it's not dam nida. If it's not dam nida, so it's mutter. There's no question about it. If it's not, if it is the breakdown of the endometrium, it is dam nida. And if it is dam nida midaraisa, let me go back to the case. That starts. So this whole thing that I talked from the day after the 7 days, whereas the breakdown of the endometrium is finished, starts a new cycle, and that new cycle ends with the period and the 7 days of the period. That's what a nida is. It's a healthy situation. That's what happens when you don't become pregnant. That's the story, and that's what a nida is. So, what happened? Zava katana, different mitzias. So what happened? The Gemara says is Amar Rab Zera. Rab Zera came and he said a halacha, and he said, 1 second. B'nai Yisrael, minhag Yisrael, B'nai Yisrael Hechmira al atzmon. The Bnei Yisrael learned Chumash, but Hechmira al atzmon, they were machmir on themselves. Sha'afilu ra'asa, it's a Gemara nida, afilu ra'asa dam, tipas dam, kechardel. Yeshevas holav zayin nikim. It's zayin nikim. Meaning what? They were machmir that what? There's so many chumras in that one sentence. The Bnei Yisrael Hechmira al atzmon, first of all, even if it's below Eis Nidasa, I'm just telling you what Chazal say. Even if it's in the 11 days, which is called below Eis Nidasa, it's not the right time altogether. So the Bnei Yisrael said, can we be 100% sure? Like, maybe somebody once explained to me that maybe women or people in general became less in touch with their body and what's going on with their body. You can understand it how you want, but the Bnei Yisrael is talking about ancient, the Machlokes Rishonim, when these Bnei Yisrael existed. So, Aleichem Hashalom. But the Bnei Yisrael said, do we know for sure if it's Eis Nidasa or if not Eis Nidasa? So that means, do we know for sure, if the question they asked is, do we know for sure if we should have a din of a nida or a din of a Zava Gedola? Do we know? So what if you make a mistake? So they were self-conscious, Bnei Yisrael. They were self-conscious about the fact that they might be getting mixed up on the calendar. Also, Zava. So Zava means a flow. Okay, what's called a flow? I mean, by the way, this is the minhag Yisrael for women to get mixed up about these things. So what's called a flow? No, this much, that much, like what is a flow and what's a kesem and what's so ichmir atzmam second chumrah. Afilu tipas dam kechardel. Afilu tipas dam kechardel ichmir atzmam. I'm a nida. Look what's going on here. There's no zava, and most probably it's below eis nidasa. It's not even the right time. And it's not the amount which it would call the flow by any definition, but to make it clear, always when I'm ras adam, how much, almost any amount, tipas dam kechardo, which is called in halacha gris, tipas dam kechardo, I'm going to be yosheva zayin nikiyim. Zayin nikiyim. Well, the answer is, how do I know if I'm a zava gedola or if I'm a nida? So I'm going to be machmir, say to the women, B'nai Yisrael, I'm going to be machmir that I'm a Zava Gedola. So they took on a chumrah of Zava Gedola, otherwise there's no Indian of sitting Zayin Nikim b'chol. So they took on the chumrah of Zayin Nikim, which is Zava Gedola. They took on a chumrah of a small amount, afilu tipas dam kechardel. Chardel is a mustard seed, which is very small. V'yei shaymrim, that they took on the chumrah of chardel as a color, which I presume is yellowish. That there's a certain type of yellow that's like a lot of, said before, there's a lot of different excretions that could be a lot of different colors and different types of mucus, and one hides the other. And if you know your colors, you know what happens if you mix green and blue and this and that. So like here's a Bucky that says that chardel is also usher. The Gemara wonders about that. Chardel's not a chumrah, chardel's a din. But I'll call upon them the chumrah that they took upon themselves, that in this 30-day cycle, we're possibly at the wrong place to be a Zava Gedola, the wrong kamut to be a Zava Gedola, and the wrong color to be a Zava Gedola. All these ksamim, all the ksamim, or as the Gemara says, ksamim d'Rabbanan, all of these things are all chumrah, but that's what the Bnei Yisrael took upon themselves. Amar Rab Zera and the Chachamim heard this, and they say in Brachas Chaf Daled, the Gemara says that this is a very important Gemara. The Gemara says in Brachas that Einoim dimli spalal mitoich halacha psuka. That when you daven, you're not supposed to start Shemona Esrei with like a kasha, because it takes away your whole Shemona Esrei. It does, especially if you have to answer it 10 minutes later in a drush. Like Ella, when you go to daven, you should go mitoich halacha psuka. It should be something psuka. Hey chedami halacha psuka, says the Gemara. What's a case of halacha psuka? What's a halacha psuka? When you get up in the morning, you have to wash nagel. What's the halacha psuka? Of all the halachas of Shas and Poskim. So the Gemara says, Rabbi, it says, hey chedami halacha psuka. Kigoin zeh shebenois Yisrael ichmir al atzmam shafilu ra tipos dam kechardel yeshavas olav zayin nekim. That's the example of halacha psuka. Huh? Nida Chav Gimel? Nida. Actually wanted to print out the sources for you. Question is, so we have to look at for a few minutes, maybe more. So therefore, what? In other words, what? This gets back to the Indian of. Is everybody with me until now? We got a little complicated lesson in amateur biology, which, by the way, is I have to tell you, as an aside. If a person doesn't understand the biology, they shouldn't be paskening shilos. because there's no way. In Hilchos Niddah, you need three things. You have to learn the halachas, obviously, which are difficult halachas. You have to have shimush and a Messiah from somebody who has a Messiah from somebody before him to teach you how to, because we're working now we're not such Bucky and Maris Dam that we could tell the difference like David HaMelech between, this Dam is this and that way, Dam is Dam. But you have to have a Messiah what's Dam, and it comes up daily, like it's not just, and there's a way of looking in the Messiah. It's interesting, when I, before I became a rabbi, so I went to the Yeshiva of Scheinberg, and I said, I need to know, what do I need to know to become a Rav? So he told me what I think was already said by Rav Chaim Volozhin. He says, "Daf gut kennen them luach." That's what he told you. Know the luach. Well, the one I keep in my stender. It tells you when to say Avarachman, when to say Tzidkos Chotzedek. That's the main thing that a Rav has to know. Okay. So I said, which is a lot of truth to that. But the one with the luach, you see, the thing is, when you're a rabbi, you have to make sure nobody else has a luach. Otherwise, you're always kapiluch. Like, what's that? What do you, okay, you got another luach. What about Hilchos Niddah? So he says, learn Hilchos Niddah. Obviously, you should learn Hilchos Niddah. Somebody's going to ask you a shiloh. You have to learn Basar B'chalav. You have to learn. Most of your day, most people are not asking. Nobody's coming to me with a chicken, the darakwal, and showing me a color once every 10 years. Somebody shows me something and it's nothing. doesn't even mean anything. Hilchos Niddah, you have to learn, and you need shimush. He says you have to have shimush in maris. You have to have shimush in maris. So I said, okay, so can the Rosh Yeshiva teach me? Nope. Nope, doesn't have time, doesn't have patience. A pile like this of Mars every day. Nope, can't teach you. So I said, so what should I do? So he said, you'll go to the Badatz Eideh Charedis, and then the Badatz Eideh Charedis, Rav Bransdorfer. So he'll teach you. So Mayor Bransdorfer, all of a sudden. So he had somebody make the call, and I went there. It was the most fascinating thing, by the way, Rav Bransdorfer. So he was one of the big poskim of the Eideh Charedis Badatz, poskim of Klal Yisrael. So his job was to every day clean out the mikveh, like wash it out, so with the soap and a sponge. So he washed out the mikveh, and after he finished washing out the mikveh, so he gave lessons in Hilchos Maris right there at the side of the mikveh. It was empty mikveh, just this picture in my mind. So when I came, we started a new cycle. This was a college, new cycle sitting at the side of the mikveh. And I was there. The Rav of Komamius was a young Rav. He's a little older than me, and he was there. The Rav of Kerem B'Yavne was there, and there was the three of us that learned with Rav Bransdorfer, Hilchos Maris, and the Yeshiva, Rav Scheinberg told me, he says, you go through it with him for whatever long it takes, and then you come back, and I'll tell you what's right and what's wrong. I tell you, so you understand the Messiah. There's a lot of people come to me and say, "Can you teach me?" I'm not but have the Messiah of my Rebbe. I don't have time. I don't have patience. I don't have. What happened here? This was the education. Shulchan Aruch was obvious, but every day he would have a lot of shilos in the whole Meisharm, and every day would be a big pile of maris, and every day he would go around this table by the mikveh, and he would say, Tar, Tameh, this is that, this is in Baki Nifla, in different simanim of this is about to get a period, this didn't get a period, this is missing a period, this one is pregnant. From the from the Mara, he would know everything, and he taught us. And at the end of the whole, and I remember how long it was, at the end of the whole thing, so he brought in the pile of Maris, brought in 3 piles of Maris, and everybody, the test was that you had to write on the Mara, each one, the psak of what it is, and if you got 100, you passed, otherwise you go through it again. So you had to get it 100%, and we did it. So I came, which by the way I still have out there, the pile of Maris, and everything was, I got 100 on the test, and then I brought it to Rav Scheinberg to it was a very simple thing, to tell me right, wrong, so, at that time, like Rav Zaks and Mattersdorf heard that I went. He wants to also go through it with me. I became like a celebrity because I had this pile of shmatas, But it was it was very interesting. Rav Gans wanted to hear what the difference between Rav Scheinberg and the Badatzei de Charedas. All these were gedolim, they were, I was just a koilga, but they wanted to know. But anyways, I would say about 50 of them is. That's called a nida? Nah. This is Meklon? No. So now I had to write down again, like everything. So I have this seer of the Maris until it becomes like kind of like a chush and natural to know. You see, like people tell, like they would stop Reb David Feinstein. He would stop him in the street and show him a Mara, and while he's walking, he would say, "Okay." It would hardly even look at it. But it's not this. He was not. It wasn't masniach in it. The pshat is that he was so. I mean, he grew up. It was so clear to him, like what the halachas, what the simanim are. Once he is a tefillas ayin, and it's a second. Okay. Back to our subject over here. So. The Bnei Yisrael are what created Hilchos Niddah, and what they basically said, that listen, with any amount of dam, with any color which is noitel dam, with any flow of dam, at any time of the month, we're going to be machmer on ourselves to be Zava Gedola. So as I said at the beginning, really the Siman and Shulchan Aruch should be called Hilchos Zava Gedola, which we keep. Hilchos Zava Gedola. However, and here's where the fun begins. We keep it, why? The Gemara says, halacha psuka. So do we keep it because B'nai Yisrael achmir al atzman? Like, what kind of a chiyuv is that? B'chal. B'nai Yisrael achmir al atzman.
Why B'nai Yisrael? Why not the Chacham?
It didn't come from the Chacham. By the way, because none of Das Yehudas came from the Chacham. None of Das Yehudas came from Chacham. It came from the minhagim. Das Yehudas, according to one shita that I've been talking about for the last few weeks, according to one shita, that's what it means. Das Yehudas. That's one of the not Das Yehudiyos. Das Yehudas, like this is something that the women came up with. In other words,
what's the process for legitimizing a new minhag?
It's miskabil. It's miskabil, and it goes back to what I've been saying for the last few weeks, that I'm very machmir on tznius, but I'm try not to be an amaretz. So what that means is that if you'll ask somebody, why do you have to keep tznius? Why do you have to keep this covered and that covered and this thing covered? So it's the wrong answer to say, oh, that's because of lifnei iver lo sitem mechshol. Could be there's a case of lifnei iver in there, but B'derech Klal is not lifnei iver. Lifnei iver is when somebody's moshid koshyayin l'nazir. You're trying to entice somebody. That's not usually the case. It just has to do with more what's on sale in the store. There's different nisyonos, chevra, whatever. But it's not usually lifnei iver. Or somebody would say, well, that's das Yehudis. Well, das Yehudis could be flexible. I mean, or somebody say, well, you see in Hilchos Kriya Shema that it's called Erev, but we're not learning. Nobody's saying Kriya Shema. You're walking down the street. So the correct answer, I don't want to say the Talmud Chacham answer, to why our daughters, our wives, our mothers should dress tzanua is because B'nai Yisrael, Yichmir al Atzman, the same thing as Hilchos Niddah. This became the way Jews dress. And part of it is flexible and part of it is not flexible. And the poskim spoke about it and the nashim spoke about it, and it's hard to make stuff up. There's a process. It has to be nashim chashuvos. It has to be, but at the end of the day, it's because of minhag. I just want to remind you of a Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer is very, very machmir on hair covering, for instance, that not even one hair should ever be showing. Today, even cutting it off. The Chassam Sofer was very machmir, because the Zohar says you have to be machmir on one hair, and the Gemara says the story of Yolsa, the Leroch, Eretz Beisius, Saras Roishi. I mentioned this. So somebody wrote to the Chassam, he's a Lamates in the Chassam Sofer Arachaim, so in the Shailon Shuvas. So somebody asked the Chassam Sofer, so we're so machmir because of a Zohar, we're so machmir because of some kind of a Maisa Charig in the Gemara. So the Chassam Sofer answered, no, we're machmir because that's our minhag. That's why we're machmir. You want to know why do we get this minhag? Where in the world it came from? So it comes from a Zohar, it comes from a Yolsa, it comes from different places. But it's not that we're machmir on a Zohar. We're machmir on a minhag, and this is the Chassam Sofer L'Shitase that holds that a minhag goes midor l'dor, which nobody else holds. Strictly the Chassam Sofer says that I have to do something because my grandfather did it, my great grandfather did it. It's a Chassam Sofer thing, and this was the case by the Oberlanders, those that kept the Chassam Sofer, and even the Yekashiyim, that because the Rav Shamshon Fol Hirsch, Talmud of the Chassam Sofer, he was a Chassam Sofer, and hence those communities had very, very strong minhagim, and that's the reason to keep tznius, and some of it is fluid and some of it is not. And halavai, as I keep on saying, halavai, there was a minhag olam or a minhag ir now that would take away a lot of the confusion, because what you have now is not pritzis, it's confusion. By and large, it's confusion and unqualified people using terms that they don't understand. Like it's not a healthy situation. But that's me, the maverick. But to get back to our case. What I want to know is what is the tokef of B'nai Yisrael Hichmir al Atzman, and I think I'm going to wait till next week to look at the iyun of it. But let me just tell you the possibilities. One possibility is it's minhag Yisrael. It's minhag Yisrael. Another possibility is, in other words, why do we have to keep? Let's say somebody doesn't want to keep it. I want to keep that, and I just keep the deraises. So minhag Yisrael. Does a minhag go from dar ladar? This kind of minhag does. It's like certain minhagim have like a din like cherem d'Rabbeinu Gershon. There's certain kinds of minhagim that the whole Klal Yisrael where Makabel has like a different type of a din of a minhag. That does go from midar ladar. Not every minhag like standing up for kiddush or sitting down for kiddush. This minhag goes midar ladar. So one possibility is a minhag. What interestingly, most Rishonim say that it's not. It might be a minhag, but since it's a minhag that the whole Klal Yisrael kept, dor acher dor, so it has a din of a neder. But it's not a personal neder. You could go to Shul and Erev Rosh Hashanah and be matur neder. It's a neder of Klal Yisrael. So the neder of Klal Yisrael, like you need some kind of an instrument, which goes beyond kol nidre, to get rid of this neder in Klal Yisrael. Being that this type of neder, by the way, usually like they didn't want to make it that there's no out at all. So it was like I've said many times, like if a person comes from a regular city and you go to a place where they don't know about the cherem d'Rabbeinu Gershon, so you're not allowed to just go ahead and marry a second wife or third wife. It doesn't work that we go to maybe Morocco or something that didn't have the cherem d'Rabbanan gershon before there were secular laws. I'm not talking about that. So, like that's a minhag which is of a karkafta de gavra, as the poskim call. That's a din of the gavra, a different type of a minhag. So it could be this has that kind of a tokef. So what that is like a din of a neder, which seems to be much more chamor than a minhag. Yeah. So it can be a minhag, it can be a neder, or it can be something else which we need to discover, some kind of a das yehudis, which is not necessarily a neder. But the point is that Rabbi in the Gemara says in Brachas, halacha psukihi. As somebody who paskins in these things, probably more than most people here, so I understand why the Gemara says halacha psukihi, why you should take this as an example of halacha psuka. Because I see when everyone comes to ask a shaila, well, maybe it's this, and maybe it's that, what's deraisa, what's derabana, what's minhag, it's got all kinds of pilpulim. Forget about it, go down and shmernes straight to menucha. It's halacha psuki, this is a nida and finish. There's some things that shouldn't be open-ended sekus and be, well, that's the din, we keep halacha, we keep Torah, we go. But what should be clear today is that what we're talking about, we're talking about usually, by the way, not to get one last thing I want to say, not to get confused. It doesn't mean that if a woman is a nida that she's not really a nida, she's a nida by herself. If she doesn't go to the mikveh, chayiv kares. Whatever it was, you got to go to the mikveh to become tahar. So the only question would come up, there's no nafkamina in terms of all the different things, you need to understand something even the Vestar Zarua, which maybe we're familiar with, that there's a night before the vest is a vest. That's all. If you look, just Google it. If you look on, well, be careful, but if you look online and look at the whole luteal cycle, you'll see that right before the zman nida, es nidasa, as the Gemara calls it, there's a secretional gland, I think, that happens, which is the night before. That's what the Arzaro was talking about. There's something that happens biologically in a woman the night before she becomes a nida. So the Arzaro says we're chayshish for that also. Maybe that's called dam nida. But the nafkamina in all of this would be, first of all, to understand it, but the nafkamina in all of this would be if there's a special need situation, which needs big poskim, bigger than me, to say that, well, if it's a minhag, let's say there's infertility of some sort. So if there's, and you're stuck in this cycle of infertility for years and years, so this needs, Rav Moshe Feinstein to basket, not Yaakov Haber. But I'm just telling you the sugya, that if it's such a case, so then maybe one can say such a thing, like if it's just a minhag, if it's a minhag, maybe there's a makom to be makel to go to the mikveh earlier. If it's a neder, so, what do you do with that? If it's a deraisa, okay, this is it, we're Jews, and that's the end of the story. There's nothing to talk about. So this is where, and I'll go through it with you a little bit, this is where the Gedolim handles it, and what to know is the makar of all of it, and the tokef of minhagim and nedarim and halachas. Okay, I'll leave. Once again, I invite everyone to have some food left from the bas mitzvah last night, and then Nasanel takes over.